Hi, this is Estev. Giving and receiving feedback often leads to tensions and discomfort. People so easily feel criticized and get defensive. Feedback, however, is necessary to improve and grow, but only when done wisely. By combining self-reflection with feedback, we can significantly increase the positive impact it can have. This is why we're going to a park setting for this video, just to remind you of the importance of taking time to cultivate the art of conscious reflection and feedback. The 3x5 of reflection and feedback is a series of checklists designed to help you give and receive constructive feedback at work. The 5 topics of reflection, 5 rules to receive, and 5 rules to give feedback are designed to help you get the most out of feedback and turn insights into actionable improvements. Before looking at these rules, we'll look at 6 different faces of feedback. People often confuse feedback and complaining. In some companies, the only way to fix problems is to fill in a feedback form or fill up the suggestion box. Complaining feedback between colleagues easily starts conflicts. This confusion is one of the reasons why people are so afraid of receiving feedback. When you're driving fast, you really need to know exactly when you cross that invisible speed limit to avoid getting into trouble. It's the same with human behavior. Feedback can help you to adjust behavior to different cultures, personalities, and styles of relationship. Every person we work with is unique. Without feedback, we can easily make wrong assumptions about how to behave and overstep that invisible line of respect. In Futurize, where continuous improvement is of the utmost importance, every new employee makes a social agreement about staying open to receive feedback, which is symbolized by "I love feedback" stickers used all around the office, and their Jolt station, which they poetically call the oasis for positive feedback. This fuels the organizational and individual learning and builds trust through transparency. It works because the focus is on caring, learning, and adjusting behaviors rather than changing people. Dyson is famous for having used several hundred iterations of prototyping and feedback, some even say more, to create this vacuum cleaner. With user-centered design processes, teams invest time and energy as early as possible to make rapid prototypes with the sole intention of testing their design early enough for the team to receive valuable feedback from users. It allows the team to fail and try again. Feedback can be built into any process to improve, develop, and learn. Just like people who gather at Christmas to share gifts, feedback in teal organizations is often considered to be a precious gift given to help each other learn and grow, which many look forward to. They use a harvester who writes down the answers from a small group of colleagues. Everybody reflects on 2 powerful questions for each person receiving feedback. What is the one thing I value with you? And what is the one area where I sense you could change and grow? The harvester then hands over the written feedback from the group as a symbolic gift for each person. The US Navy SEALs talk about taking extreme ownership for feedback with regards to what worked or failed on the battlefield, for example, to debrief the causes of accidental friendly fire. As a leader, asking for feedback is more heroic than giving feedback, because it requires great courage to ask and great humility to receive that feedback. Because there are so many ways to interpret the idea of feedback, it's easier to make feedback positive and constructive with a few rules. Let's start with the 5 rules of receiving feedback, which are the most tricky. All the research on the psychology of feedback points towards the importance of feedback being useful when it is asked for. So let's start with the assumption that cultivating an atmosphere of trust and constructive feedback requires people to step up and ask, and therefore we need rules to receive feedback. If you love your tea or coffee moment, you'll like this rule. Number 1, reflect before receiving feedback. Before asking, give yourself permission to find a quiet place to translate your need for feedback into a clear and pragmatic set of questions. Don't ask for feedback until you've actually reflected on what you need feedback on. Think about how to formulate it as a question. You could write on a paper your answer to the question, what feedback am I able and willing to receive? When you've had a bad day and your colleague offers you feedback, even the smallest constructive criticism is likely to be hard for you to receive. So don't ask if you're not ready. Make sure that you're using enough Philautia by considering if you have the energy and mental space to hear what others have to say. It's okay to say no if it's not the right time for you, and to suggest to postpone the feedback to later when you have more bandwidth to receive it as a gift. Are you looking for advice, praise, or opinions? Make sure that as a receiver, you first clarify the type of feedback you want. What do you need from this feedback? It's a good idea to frame the feedback beforehand by informing them of what you're trying to achieve. For example, you could say, I'm trying to redesign this website with the following creative guidelines. Then you can explain your specific needs for feedback in the form of a clear question. If you want advice on how to fix problems, you might ask, I have a problem to fix. Could you give me some expert advice on how to solve it? Notice that advice assumes that you are choosing people who have enough expertise to give you constructive advice feedback. Beware of asking the wrong people. If you need opinions to make decisions, solve problems, or design in co-creation with people, you can ask for, I need your opinion. Could you tell me what you think about, and so on. Opinions and advice are what people share most easily. Remember that their opinions are simply a reflection of their values, beliefs, and experience. If you simply need reassuring and uplifting, just ask for it with, I need uplifting and motivating. Could you give me some positive feedback, please? If your intention is to fix creative problems or tackle challenges, you could say, could you give me some feedback? But designers who understand how important it is to ask for specific feedback would ask, how might we align these graphics with our guidelines, for example, to get clear and actionable feedback? The more you specify what you need, the more useful the feedback is. The next time your colleague storms into a meeting angrily, giving everybody a hard time with feedback in the form of complaints or personal criticisms such as, nobody is doing anything about this deadline, first, try not to take it too personally. If you've studied nonviolent communication, you'll know that he's most likely projecting his feelings onto others. Feelings cannot be solved, simply experienced. That's why it's often enough to acknowledge a negative feeling with green mirroring, such as, you're clearly upset about this situation. As we'll cover in the video on ego, you can always choose to receive his point of view as a gift. Maybe he's voicing an important elephant in the room, which everybody else is ignoring, despite it actually being needed for everybody. The challenge is to keep a healthy distance from your own ego being triggered into emotional turmoil, and offer to work as a team to fix any emerging problems. You can assume that he's just trying his best, but needing to voice his frustration. If you feel that the situation requires an apology, which is blue, saying, I'm sorry, is only really useful after you fully understand the situation as a need or as a problem to be solved. So now that you've seen how the 5 rules to receive feedback work, the 5 rules to give feedback are just the mirror opposite of the rules we've just seen. The first rule is often forgotten. Giving and receiving feedback can be challenging and requires trust. When you intend on hosting a conversation for feedback to be received constructively, only give feedback in a space which feels psychologically safe for the person receiving feedback. Make sure the environment feels safe for everyone, and that the conversation can remain confidential in order to fully respect everybody. Therefore, the next time you're with your colleague in the elevator, it would be kind to ask, where would you like us to have a chat, before rushing to give them constructive feedback. If the other person is never asking for feedback, which does happen with the type 0 and type 1 behaviors, which we saw in the attitude video, you might have to offer feedback. In this case, check if it's the right time. Make sure that you're fully respecting that they might not have the energy or mental space to handle your feedback by using green timing. You could try, for example, asking a green question to check this, such as, when would be a good time for me to share some constructive feedback with you? I used to have a colleague who was always late. It would have been so easy for me to assume that he's just very disorganized and sloppy with timekeeping without checking why he was late. I could give him some feedback in front of everybody just to teach him a lesson. But feedback is not complaining. When I said, you probably have your own good reasons for being late, could we have a chat after the meeting? It was a kind gesture, which led me to quickly find out that he was not sloppy. He simply needed to create a higher level of challenge with his deadlines, and he needed to experience flow. He was too skilled for his job, and he was unconsciously making this happen to raise his perceived level of challenge. When we discussed this and increased his responsibilities, he stopped being late. So ask, don't assume you know and complain without thinking. It could be an opportunity for you to build trust with your colleague, who you were about to complain to in front of others. A bit of empathy can turn your complaining into trust. The next time somebody asks you for some vague feedback, you could be kind and give them more usable feedback by helping them to clarify their feedback needs. You could ask, what type of feedback would help you most? My opinion, advice, or some praise, before rushing to give your advice, opinions, or unwelcome judgments. Think back to your angry colleague or to the annoying one who's always late. It's more helpful to try and fix situations instead of people. You'll find that nobody likes to be fixed. It triggers their ego into being defensive. If you focus on the situation as a problem to be solved by asking, how might we solve this situation together? You show a clear intention of uniting as a team. It will make it easier for your colleague to change their behavior without losing face. You probably noticed that each of the 5 rules has 2 faces, the receiving and the giving side of each rule. I find them easier to remember with their themes. Rule number 1 is about psychological safety. Rule number 2 is about timing. Rule number 3 is to help you think if you need praise, advice, or opinions. Rule number 4 helps to make sure the feedback is useful, while rule number 5 is to avoid ego becoming a source of conflict. These 10 rules are also really useful at home with your family and with your friends. So what about reflection? Hopefully, you now understand the value of preparing yourself with some good quality self-reflection on the following 5 key topics. So here are 3 practical ways you might want to try self-reflecting before your next feedback session. Journaling has been used for centuries by great leaders, explorers, and researchers as a way to think about their decisions, their needs, and their intentions. Here are the 5 topics of self-reflection which can help you evolve in your career. So first, how do you feel about your job? You can do this by pragmatically evaluating your level of flow. How motivated, skilled, and challenged do you feel? Secondly, what is your calling, your purpose, or your mission at work? How does it match your role and responsibilities? How much meaningful impact does your work actually have? Which of your contributions are valued by others? This is where you can reflect on your attitude to change and your goals, for example. Thirdly, regarding people, how do you relate to your colleagues? What did you learn from them, and what did they learn from you? Are there any ego conflicts or tensions in your teams? Regarding money, do you feel comfortable with your current salary? Or do you feel like you qualify for a raise? And do you know what to do to get a promotion? Last but not least, if you're being kind with yourself, which skills, specific projects, or issues would you like feedback on? Who would be the best person to ask for feedback? And what do you plan on doing with this feedback? Don't worry, if you missed some of these powerful questions, we've also prepared a digital guided reflection for you. We turned Jonas, our in-house coach and psychologist, into a self-reflection bot. Basically, when you open your smartphone's camera and just point it at the QR code, it opens up an automated and confidential dialogue with Jonas-the-Bot. If you're not on a smartphone, you can always click the link given with the video. Jonas will guide you through the same questions that we just covered, with space for you to enter your thoughts smoothly and quickly. My favorite part is the email summary, which is made for you to save and bring to a work performance meeting, for example. If you find it easier to think things through with a friend or a colleague, I suggest that you invite somebody you trust to do a presencing session with you. Some call this a dialogue interview. As we saw in the video on the 3 levels of communication, presencing is more than just a casual chat. It's about your colleague being present and sensing to help you open up your thinking without them judging you. It's like using an empathic mirror. If you're interested in the art of presencing, you can check out Otto Scharmer from MIT's Sloan School of Management, who set up the Presencing Institute. You could ask your colleague to go for a walk and guide you through the 5 topics. If your colleague is able to be green, ask them to focus on curiosity towards you by checking assumptions that pop up in their mind. That should help you feel respected and will help you to self-reflect. They should simply focus on getting you to open your thoughts with green questions around the 5 topics. To be kind to the person being presenced, I usually offer to bring a notepad to harvest the insights and questions which come out of each presencing session. So now, you've seen the 5 rules to receive and the 5 rules to give feedback, with the 5 topics to reflect upon beforehand, summarized here in this picture of your reflection park. If you didn't catch the QR code to access the guided reflection with Jonas the coaching bot, you can get it from this downloadable infographic. I'd recommend that you keep this handy for your next work review sessions. So, the next time you're needing feedback, remember to ask yourself, are you looking for advice, praise, or opinions?